Right, so we are going to take a look at errors in this video. We have two types of errors. We have random errors and we have systematic errors. First of all, we're going to have a little look at random errors. Now, if you have low reliability, that suggests random errors, and also if you have low precision, that also will give you random errors. Low reliability, sometimes if you're using anything that is organic, as in plants or food or products that have come from living things, inherently you are going to have variation that comes from the fact that they would have had different growing conditions. They might have been stored differently. They might have had different amounts of sunlight. So living organisms always give you random errors. That's just the nature of living things. What you need to do is try and limit them as much as possible. So that might be buying them all from the same supermarket, buying the same brand, making sure you have the same species. So you're not buying oranges and mandarins and satsumas, even though they're all very similar. You want to have the same variety. Other things you should think about for your control variables is how you store your food. So storage, getting to and from supermarket, if you've got an 11 hours that you're doing this experiment, if you've left the milk out for 11 hours, for instance, it may not be exactly the same at the beginning. So kind of keeping things in the refrigerator, things like that, trying to reduce the effect of these random errors. If you're doing experiments at like an enthalpy of combustion, you're always going to get drafts. You can try and minimize them, but you can't eliminate them. If you're doing a low light experiment, because these are working labs, people are in and out. The light, although you might minimize it, you're not going to be able to eliminate it. But those are things you can think about for improvements. Low precision will come from your equipment. So there's two ways to increase your precision. You can either use more precise equipment, or you can have a larger reading. Okay, so that might mean you taking a bigger sample, using 25 cubic centimeter titer instead of 10. Or if you're doing a titration, if you use a more dilute acid in the burette, you'll get a bigger reading. When you are looking at your equipment, please don't just kind of willy-nilly say, yes, I'll use a more precise stopwatch, or I'll use a more precise balance. If the measuring cylinder you use was giving you a 10% error and the balance was giving you a 0.1% error, making the balance more precise isn't actually going to affect your random errors. You need to focus on whichever equipment gave you the biggest percentage uncertainty. Okay, so now we're going to look at systematic errors. You will have systematic errors if you have low accuracy. These can come from if you have issues with equipment having a zero error or needing calibration. Okay, it might also, for instance, you could have double checked the concentration. So you could have done a standardization titration if you wanted to check the concentration of your acids, things like that. The other thing is you need to look at kind of procedural issues, things that might always be causing an effect in one direction. So if you were measuring light emission, but you always had a background amount of light, that would always increase your light reading, because you would have light coming from somewhere, not just your experiment. heat loss from enthalpy experiment. You're always going to lose heat if you're doing enthalpy of combustion. That's never going to be too high. It's always going to be too low. Procedural ones, you're never really likely to eliminate these, but you are meant to try and control them as much as you can and talk about their impact at the end. Some of them you might not realise until after you've done an experiment, and of course those would be improvements that you put in. So that's the difference between random and systematic errors. If you have random errors, the other thing I haven't mentioned is because of random errors, when you average a random error, so let's say this is my true value here. When I take readings with a random error, sometimes they're going to be too high, sometimes they're going to be too low. But the more you repeat, the closer you are going to get for your average being close to the true average. Okay. Whereas if you have a systematic error, you will have your true value, but because all of them are going to be affected in the same direction, no matter how many readings you take, they're going to cluster around an average that is kind of transposed away from the true value. Okay, so if you have random errors, especially if there's something you can't do much about, flickering flames or changes in DNA, then random errors, taking more readings and averaging is always a good idea. Remember nowadays not to just take out anomalous results without justification.